it's become increasingly clear that autism is a major cause of gender dysphoria. So around only 2% of the population thought to have autism in the general population, but reports from the Tavistock and the staff there show that 50% of those referred for puberty blockers were on the spectrum. So half of them, that's amazing. And so why is that? So I'm going to go into some of the main reasons, because this is going to be something you're going to encounter a lot. If you're dealing with young girls, you're likely going to be dealing with girls on the spectrum. So I've got here the extreme male brain theory of autism. So discovering this theory changed everything for me. I was back home in Essex in 2015, and I came across a book on my mum's bookshelf, and that book was The Essential Difference by Professor Simon Baron-Cohen. At this juncture, you have to address the elephant in the room and say, yes, they are related. And he's Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin, the comedian Ali G. So moving on from that, his full title, Professor Sir Simon Baron-Cohen, which is a mouthful, he teaches at Cambridge University. He's one of the world's leading experts in autism, and he's also one of the world's leading experts in cognitive sex differences. That is to say, how men and women think differently. And he lays out the evidence for that in the book, The Essential Difference. Through all his years of research, he made a shocking discovery that men and women are actually different in the way that they think. So I'm going to boil down the research from that book into one sentence. Are you ready? Okay. Generally speaking, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. Generally speaking, men have better systematizing skills and women have better empathizing skills, generally speaking. So when we talk about systematizing skills and empathizing skills, what do we actually mean? So Baron-Cohen uses the term systematizing as a shorthand for the ability to recognize patterns and understand natural and technical systems, while empathizing refers to sort of constellation of social skills, such as the ability to intuit other people's emotional states, body language, so on. So far, so obvious. So where does the autism come in, let alone the trans? So building on this research, Baron-Cohen discovered that the autistic brain actually resembles an exaggerated version of the typical male brain. That is to say, high levels of systematizing, low levels of empathizing. And that's why he coined this term, the extreme male brain theory of autism. So I've got a graph here. This is from one of the studies that he conducted with just under 5,000 participants, and it shows empathy levels here. So what we've got here is the dark red line is non-autistic women, and they have the highest levels of empathy. Dark blue line is non-autistic men, so they have less empathy than women, but they're not too far behind. Then there are, right at the beginning of the chart, those two pale ones, that's autistic men and autistic women. You can see that they both have much lower levels of empathy. Empathy isn't the only indicator in the male-female brain stuff, but it's one of the major ones. So I've also put the link to this study if you want to look at more of the, there's loads more, but that's in the last page under online resources. So personally, I had been tested and I came out in the second percentile for compassion, which means that if you had a room of 100 people, random people, male, female, that there'd probably only be about one person with less empathy than me in the room. So for me, learning that the autistic brain resembled an exaggerated male brain, neurologically, actually really set me free. Because I realized, yeah, I'm just wired differently. And I wasn't imagining it either. I actually did have more in common in terms of interests and many other things with my male peers. But that wasn't my fault. It's just the way that God made me. And so I realized that Also, I'm not a failure as a woman for having low levels of empathy. Again, my brain was just wired differently. So as I processed that in the background over the next few years, my gender dysphoria gradually disappeared. I stopped rebelling against the category of woman and realized that it was wide enough to include people like me too. And by the grace of God, it's been many years now since I found myself thinking I'm a man. So my default now is that I'm a woman. Certainly, I don't think since the pandemic, I can't remember in the last 4 or 5 years thinking that. So that's amazing. So I guess that took maybe about 3-4 years to work through. So it was slow, but it did happen. But it's terrifying, obviously, to think that had trans ideology been around when I was growing up, I definitely would have pursued transition. Like, definitely. I know myself. And I would have been like, that is the answer for me. So thank you, God, for saving me from that. Gender ideology was not mainstream, obviously, when I was young. By the time it became popular, my dysphoria was already on the way out. So, in fact, actually, I followed the typical trajectory for a girl who experienced gender dysphoria from childhood, like Julie was saying. So given time and space, almost all of them will just grow out of it naturally in their 20s. This is also why, as I think someone said yesterday, you very rarely find middle-aged women now coming out and saying, I'm a man, because those who experience that gender confusion at an early age, they've already outgrown it. Where's my mouse gone? So one of the reasons we've seen this huge hike in girls wanting to transition is that girls like me have been encouraged to see these distressing feelings as indicators that they were born in the wrong body and the solution is medical transition. I'm just going to go through a few things here that I'll touch on briefly, some other elements of how autism plays into this that might help you to understand how autism can cause gender dysphoria for girls. I've got here delayed impairment in social understanding. Delay or impairment. So obviously girls are typically more socially skilled, and they also demonstrate those skills earlier than the boys do. So when you've got girls starting to interact relationally and engage in talk-based play, but the boys are still sort of running around pretending to be aeroplanes, it's like, which do you think is an autistic girl is going to relate to more and gravitate towards? Black and white thinking, as Julie said. For me, I wouldn't have been able to actually say this in a sentence, but what I was thinking was along the lines of, I'm not like the girls, so I must be a boy, on a subconscious level. Detachment from reality. So autistic people lack what's called theory of mind. That is the ability to put oneself in other people's shoes, really. And this means that autistic people, they're not always able to understand that others will not see things the way that they do. So they think if they just change their pronouns and say they're male, that the world will just agree and act accordingly, like it's a flick of a switch, really. They're also prone to lose themselves in fantasy, things like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Star Trek. And autistic people are often drawn heavily into those sort of wonderful worlds because real life is very painful. And notice that such worlds are often made up of weird and wonderful creatures who are nevertheless friends and accepted for their quirks rather than bullied or shut out. That's a big theme in fantasy. And also, when I say that they can lose themselves in fantasy, I really mean that. Like, you really can over-focus on that and forget the real world and how it operates. So it's very easy to get caught into a delusion and not see how it doesn't work in the real world. I've got masters in certain areas, massive blind spots in others. So another characteristic of autism is that hyper-focus on areas of interest. So autistic people will often dive into this world of gender, and they might be able to bamboozle you with very intellectual sounding ideas about constructs and all this kind of stuff, heteronormativity. But at the same time, they may not have considered for 1 second the idea of being permanently medicalized, made infertile potentially, or asexual, likely unsuccessful in the dating market. You might think, oh, these things are things you'd like to think about, but honestly, when I think back to the way I was thinking about it, just did not think about those things for one split second. And basically what I'm saying is, if it sounds like they can be very convincing, they've really thought it all through and I know what I'm doing, unfortunately, they do have massive blind spots. So that's something to sort of point out maybe to them. Disassociation from the body. So this isn't always the case, but like many autistic people, I experienced a complete dissociation from my physical body. So I thought about my body, I often say this, I thought about my body as much as you probably think about like the crook of your elbow. That is to say, you know it's there, you can see it, but it's irrelevant to you, and you never have any cause to think about it, and why would you? It's functioning and there's no problem. So for me, I didn't notice any changes in my body. I didn't notice any, during my puberty, I didn't notice when I got my first period. I can't tell you anything like that, but there are positives to this, which is, that some autistic people might have zero body image issues, but there's also negatives. So not realizing that your sex body is important in the world, that you're not just a brain floating around, and a lot of people, just autistic people, they're all up in their head, and so they don't realize that their body and the way their body interacts with the world actually has any bearing on anything. Difficulty with change. So autists are very fixed thinking, and they can be incredibly stubborn. I like to use the example of like a crossword. So no one likes it when you fill out a crossword and you realize suddenly that one of the words from which all the other words stem is wrong, and it's an effort to go back and you have to rub it all out and you have to undo all that work. For autistic people, this is really, really hard. Once they've determined an answer, they will hold on to it very tightly, and they're likely to crowbar everything else around it, even if it's clear to the other people that it's not working. So this is why autists might cling on to that worldview, even though it's full of contradictions and problems. Nuance is overwhelming. So gender ideology offers a very simple one-line explanation of distress. So you were born in the wrong body, and the solution is transition. It's a lot easier to accept that than to face the prospect of unpicking, through years of therapy perhaps, a complex web of beliefs, expectations, emotions, stereotypes. It's very hard for autistic people, so it's much easier for them to just kind of focus on the simple solution. So those are some of the things about autism and childhood gender dysphoria. So I'm going to come back to those in a little bit just to share some practical advice for helping girls in that boat.